Here we go. Hello everyone. Welcome to week 4, module 4. Thank you for your thoughts about how things are going for you thus far. Some of you still need to make your comments, but I'm sure that they will come in soon. I look forward to reviewing all of them. In Module 3, last week, we introduced some of the legal risks of performance appraisals. Sometimes the errors may not be a legal issue, but could lead to validity and inconsistency problems which contaminate the quality of the performance appraisal system of the organization and could lead to lawsuits. Since rater errors are common and very hard to avoid, we spend time in this week describing many of the most common ones, such as the recency, primacy, leniency effect, horns and halos, and sampling errors. We will also explore the recommendations that can reduce the errors, such as training and self-awareness. This module will also begin to focus on best practices for preparing and delivering a performance appraisal. Okay, beginning again here. Hello everyone, and welcome to Module 4, Week 4. I appreciate the input that you're giving on the mid-course opinion poll. I look forward to reading all of your comments. A few have not submitted theirs yet, but that's okay. I know that they'll be coming in soon. In Module 3, we introduced some of the legal risks of performance appraisals. Sometimes the errors may not be a legal risk, but they could lead to that. And at the very least, they could lead to validity or inconsistency problems, which contaminate the quality of the performance appraisal system of the organization. Since rater errors are common and very hard to avoid, we spend time in this module describing many of the most common ones, such as recency, meaning very recent views, primacy, leniency effect, horns, halos, and sampling errors. We also explore recommendations that will reduce the errors, such as training and self-awareness. In this module, we'll also begin to focus on best practices for preparing and delivering a performance appraisal. Frameworks are introduced that will help to inform ways to prepare, present the information in a way that it will be helpful to the individual, motivate them to higher productivity, and also how to coach and employ. Like with so many other organizational practices and processes that we all see, technology is enabling more efficiency for data collection, and that is the same case for performance appraisals. We can see more efficiency of data collection from some of the trends in information technology, also the delivery and tracking, monitoring of the goals. In some organizations, employees can monitor their performance themselves through analytics provided by the organization without the need of a supervisor in between. We introduced this trend in our very first module of the course. Our readings this week will further our information about information technology changes and how they are influencing how organizations manage performance. And as you know, you also will be sharing at least one article from your research about information technology this Thursday by midnight, and you will also share your entire paper with the class after you have submitted it to the Dropbox this Sunday evening. I think you'll find this week particularly interesting. Here's our learning outcomes for the week. By the end of this week, you should be able to recognize common rater errors if you do not already, and recommend ways to reduce rater errors. You should be able to evaluate best practices in conducting performance appraisal interviews, and we'll learn about some different types. It's always good to put a framework to what we're studying. And you should be able to assess management information technology systems roles in effective and efficient performance management systems in organizations. This is just a reminder of something that I know that you already know. We have repeated things in the first few modules. That is to help with retention. So we want performance appraisals to be valid. This means that they are measuring what we want them to measure and not something else. Consistent, if someone else were to use the same data and make the evaluation, they would have the same overall rating. Cost effective, this is not only money that it costs to perform the appraisal, but I also like to include the time that is spent on it. I know time is so very valuable, and some of us have very little time to spend, so we want whatever it is that we do in our performance appraisals to be effective in both a monetary way but also a time way. Accepted, if individuals do not accept those that the performance appraisal is one that is valid and is one that measures performance in a fair way, then it will not be accepted. It will not be accepted by the person delivering the evaluation or the person receiving it. Of course, we want our performance appraisals to be linked vertically up to the overall goals of the organization and those outside influences that we talked about earlier in the course. But we also want them to be linked horizontally. We want there to be consistent messages across the organization in all of the performance appraisals that we do. We want it to be free from bias. That's primary focus this week. And we also want them to be timely. I believe in giving feedback as quickly as it can be done in a quality manner. That's one of the reasons I'm as fast on the grading that I can be. I want you to have feedback on your assignment before you forget what that assignment was. And that's the same in organizations. We want a person's performance appraisal to be one that is of a reasonable period of time, that they still recall the incidents that may be shared. That's why I particularly like some of the new technology that provides for much more feedback throughout the year. You don't have to wait until a whole year to give someone feedback. Let's give that feedback more frequently. So let's dive into some of the common rater errors. As we go through this, think about some of your performance appraisals and maybe some that you know your colleagues have given, and see if you recognize any of these errors. And there are several slides of common rater errors. So there's quite a few of them that can creep into our performance appraisal delivery. First of all, bias. Bias is a personality-based tendency, either toward or against something in the case of performance assessment. Bias is toward or against an individual employee. All human beings have biases, but supervisors cannot afford to allow their biases to enter into their evaluation of performances. I mentioned that there is a tool, there are several, but one that I like is called the implicit association test. It was designed by Harvard. It is referred to as the IAT. This will help us as individuals to surface some of the unconscious biases that we have. And I think that you would find it helpful just to take it yourself, but also to to see if maybe you use it as a team to see if there are any unconscious biases that can be surfaced that would help your team or your organization. Next is stereotyping. This is mentally classifying a person into an affinity group and then identifying the person as having the same assumed characteristics as the group. Although stereotyping is most always assumed to be negative, there are many incidents where the stereotyping can be positive. Whether it's positive or negative, we need to judge. We need to judge in a way that is not based upon our stereotyping, our unconscious biases, but based on the requirements of the job. The halo or horns era. The halo occurs when the evaluator has a generally positive or negative, that's the horns, impression of an individual, and the evaluation then extends that general impression to other categories of performance to create an overall evaluation that is either positive or negative. We need to objectively evaluate individual employees based on their actual performance, not on something that we are associating with that individual in either a positive or negative way. Can you think of any examples that maybe you have seen of the halo or horns effect? Again, this is associating something positive or something negative that the person perhaps has done, or association with someone perhaps that they know. A common one is if a person has a really good sense of humor, it's sort of a halo effect, and it's you enjoy the person, you like the person, but the good personality and humor is really not something that is impacting their job. So let's be careful with the halo or horns effect. Next are also some very common errors, and these unfortunately we see often. These are distribution errors. Often we see these when the organization requires you to rank your employees or requires you to do a force distribution. Think about the bell-shaped curve, and if we were to look at the severity, the bell-shaped curve would be not a bell shape, but it would be over to the very right, where you have lower performers in that category. Central tendency, it would be in the center. The leniency, it would be over to the left, where you have very high performers. So the severity is when an evaluator is being very strict, being very severe, and is putting everyone in the low category. You may have heard sometime in your career, well, if you're new in your position, you just cannot be performing well. Well, you can. So a person can be very severe, and that is an error. We need to be very objective and very fair. Central tendency is just going through and marking everyone as average. This happens too, particularly when a person has a lot of evaluations to do. They may not be accepting that the process is one that they feel is giving good input, so they just mark everyone as average. Leniency is when we're very easy in our evaluation, and we mark everyone as having done a very good job. So these are three things, and we need to guard against them. What we generally look for is that bell-shaped curve rather than the severity or the leniency, and we also definitely do not want the central tendency. The similarity error occurs when the raters evaluate some ordinates that they consider more similar to themselves. This is sometimes also called the just like me era. If a person seems to be just like we are, then we seem to think more highly of them. Unfortunately, we make an error when we do that. And conversely, if a person is dissimilar to ourselves, we can sometimes not rate them as highly. We consider them a poor employee. I'm someone who is task oriented. I have checklists to be sure I get everything done, and therefore, if see someone who is doing this the same, I could, if I were to make an error, I could say, wow, they're just like me. They have a checklist and they check it off. Well, we don't want to do that. We want to be fair and know that individuals have different ways of accomplishing things, so we want to avoid the similarity or dissimilar error. The proximity error is that if you have a performance appraisal that has categories next to each other, research has shown that there is a tendency, if you have graded low or high on one category, that a category next to it in approximate location to it, then it would also have that similar rating. So if you have, for example, communication as a category, and you've rated the person high or low on that category, and then the next category is being innovative, the first rating could have an influence on the other. So we need to look back and see if we have done this to be sure that we are not having a proximity error. Still, other errors have to do with recency, with contrast, and attribution error. The recency error occurs when raters use only the last few weeks or the last few months or something that happened yesterday, and take that to influence the overall rating. We can avoid the recency error by evaluating the employee based on the entire assessment, which is usually 6 to 12 months. We can use the critical incident method, and that really helps with our recall of the entire period more objectively. I recommend to all managers to keep a record of some sort of their employees' experience over the year. Put into that file the good things, the things not so good, so you can then have some incidents that you can share with the employee when it comes time to the evaluation. And if we're the person being evaluated, I recommend to all of us that we keep a what some people call a attaboy or an attagirl file. I call it my me file. It's where I put things in my file that I've been complimented on, or something that I feel good about, or if a client has told me that they've really had a good experience with some work that I've done. That way, if you do it, you have that available to give to your manager at the time of the performance evaluation or before, just to say, hey, here's some things that I just thought I might like to share with you, since I know that you're beginning to work on my evaluation. I think it's a good practice. Some people feel that maybe that's boasting about our work, but sometimes our managers are not totally familiar with all the good things that we've done. So just something to keep in mind. Contrast occurs when the rater compares and contrasts performance between two employees, rather than using absolute measures of performance in order to measure and evaluate each employee. We can avoid contrast errors by objectively evaluating individual employees based on their actual performance. We must use the ranking system correctly if we've been asked to do that in our organization. I feel that we should first assess each individual without trying to rank them. So assess each individual on the items that have been given to us on the assessment form to use, and then only after we have given the ratings to rank them if that is what is required. The same in your force distribution. So do the rating first and then see how it comes out on your recommended or forced distribution. If you see that those reporting to you are not falling into that required distribution, then take that up with your manager or someone who has decision-making authority over the distribution. It doesn't hurt to do, and if you have the evaluations to support that conversations, you'll have a better chance of getting some relief from that forced distribution. Attribution errors. Attribution errors we see, unfortunately, so very often. This is making the assumption that someone's behavior is caused by something other than what it actually is. So we want to have a root cause analysis to help us understand what is causing the behavior rather than just looking at the symptom and making our own assumption. So an attribution error occurs when an individual assumes reasons or motivations such as, oh, the person has a bad attitude, they don't have the same values as I do, they are not participating well because they're shy, they're not participating well because they don't have an interest. Attribution errors in performance appraisals can occur when the rater observes an employee's action, such as the ones that I have named, or maybe being argumentative regarding a question, and assumes that the individual has some negative attitude or has a negative trait or anything else, when it's actually not the case. Just a quick example, it may be that someone is coming into work late and you assume that the person is not motivated or doesn't like their work anymore, and so you have a counseling session with that person to maybe discipline them for coming in late, rather than asking, could you tell me why you're coming in late? It may be that the person has decided to take a class in the morning to develop themselves even more for the job. It may be that they have a transportation problem. It may be that they have a family member that they're taking care of and they don't want to share that information. So our assumption is wrong. We have attributed the reason for a person's performance to something other than what it actually is. So let's be very careful with that. In the assignment that you have in the class that we call the Dorsey-Gallagher case, you will sit down with Dorsey, who is a sales manager, and you will counsel him regarding his performance. Sometimes students make an attribution error. They assume that his performance is for one reason when it is actually something else. So be careful with that in that particular assignment, but also in all else that we do. You're going to present research about trends in performance appraisals. So I've given you some articles that will assist you as you're thinking about the information technology and how it might help with some of the trends that we're seeing outside of information technology. And so here's just a few of them. First of all, there's a bit of a trend for foregoing traditional annual performance reviews in favor of web-based or mobile-based technologies. The mobile-based and web-based can give us real-time, even 360 performance type evaluations that are done in a much quicker, more frequent method than the traditional annual performance appraisal. So that's one of the trends. Also, we're seeing some instant feedback apps allowing staff to rate each other, but also we can get information about ourselves. One example is the instant feedback apps that GE has. There they call it PD at GE. that's performance development at General Electric, is designed so their 300,000 employees worldwide can gain instant feedback on their performance 24/7. The app is also available on all of the employees' smartphones and other devices. Wearables are similar to our Fitbits or other devices that we use maybe on our smartphones. They provide data such as an individual's location, bio data, and production level. Some say that this is a little much, but experts say that conducting more frequent evaluations using any of these that we have just named appeals to an increasingly younger workforce, or those that really enjoy the technology and also appreciate the fast feedback. We are accustomed today to instant feedback through text messages or other means, and so we want that when it comes to our work. I struggle in my classes about being able to give as quick feedback as I know that many of you have come to expect in other parts of your lives, but some of the technology available to us online is not in keeping with what has advanced in organizations. I try to put as much technology and as much time into my classes as I possibly can, because I know that this feedback that is timely is something that you all benefit, and what you have come to expect in other parts of your life. One of the important aspects too of some of the trends is that we can have goals that are more agile. This means that we have the ability to change them. So it used to be that you would have a goal that spans across a whole year, and even if you achieve that goal in the first 3 months, or if you see that you cannot achieve that goal, that there's not the ability to go back and change it. But today we have that ability. In some of the readings this week, we look at some of the other organizations that have been doing such things as getting rid of the traditional annual performance reviews. The Dutch International Bank does this. MGM Resorts International do this, and I've given you a site called Booking.com. It's an organization, and they also have moved in favor of web-based technologies so they can conduct real-time 360 evaluations. You'll see that I've also given you an article from Empraise. Another organization that you know about is Workday. You maybe have used some of their tools. They're both based in California, and they're using instant feedback, and they're saying that their apps boost productivity by allowing the staff to rate each other and do the other things that we have talked about. And yes, Empraise is being used at GE, and as you know, GE is famous for the rank and yank philosophy, forcing employees to be ranked, and then the bottom ones will be reassigned or exited from the organization. And they're using the PD at GE, it's the performance development at GE that I just mentioned. One VP of HR named Amy Wilson has summed it up, I think, nicely, and she is the Vice President of Human Resources or Capital Management at Workday, and she made the quote to SHRM, which is the Society for Human Resource Management, that they're really enjoying the applications that they have. It's more continuous feedback, more forward-looking, which is another trend, and truly focuses on performance and performance development. And they've had great results with the technology that they have used. So I hope that you'll find your research, but also the articles that I've given you in the websites this week of benefit. As next week we turn to actually delivering the feedback to class members. I'm sorry, not to class members. Next week we look forward to delivering our performance appraisals to employees who report to us, and we'll focus more on that. But it's the preparation for the performance appraisal interview and the role of coaching that is so important. So no matter the type of appraisal we use, whether we use technology, no matter the situation, the person conducting the interview needs to take the needed time to prepare, to do the assessment, to think about any biases that they may have that are unconscious. We can think about them and maybe ask another person's opinion or use the tool that I mentioned to see if we maybe are plagued with some unconscious biases that could come into our appraisal. And we need to think about the employees so the feedback session can be an effective one. We've given you in the class, and we've discussed frameworks that can be helpful, such as Maslow's hierarchy of needs, such as the framework about organizational justice, such as Vroom's expectancy theory. We've thought about cultural differences, the cause and effect or root analysis, the legal ramifications of performance appraisals, and more. We also look this week at all of the many rater errors that can come into our appraisals. So we'll continue to explore this next week when we share with you even more frameworks that you can use in your preparation and your delivery of the evaluation itself. So this wraps up the overview of the content this week and gives you a little bit of a view of how you can use some of the things that we're talking about this week in your assignment and our discussion next week. But first, some of the readings. Here's some of the highlights of the readings that I have assigned for the week. The Bear article, the Bear article, which is titled Conducting a Performance Appraisal Interview. It was originally published in '97, but it is still very current, and it has been republished many times since because it is still very, very relevant. It provides you with one of the most helpful resources, I think, for your assignment regarding the Dorsey Gallagher. In the Dorsey Gallagher case, you expect that he might not be receptive to the information that you're going to share with him. And the article shares a nice framework for different types of interviews that you could use. It helps to be able to guard against your own avoidance of sitting down with Dorsey or the defensiveness that maybe he will have. The article also tells you about different approaches that you can take, and in the assignment with Dorsey Gallagher, we're going to ask you which approach did you choose. It could be the tell and sell that's described in the article, the tell and listen. It could be a problem-solving approach, or it could be a mixed messaging. It will be well worth your time to read the Bear article carefully. The Capelli is an assessment of performance and some common myths about performance reviews, and they are debunked in this article. The article I think will be very helpful to you. The one myth that is reported in it is that our workforce has a consistent number of A-level, B-level, and C-level performers. And another myth that is debunked is that the appraisals do not drive promotions. See what you think about these when you read about them and see what Capelli has to say. Maybe these myths will be debunked in your mind and maybe not. The Kichi article, How Gender Bias Corrupts Performance Reviews, is speaking to a bias that some individuals may have. It's a gender bias. We didn't go into this one specifically this week, but it falls under the category of those unconscious or maybe sometimes conscious biases that can come into our evaluations. But most important is the article talks about what we can do about it. And it also talks about some of the legal issues and how many times reviews can be subjective and therefore lend themselves to be more risk at any of the biases that we may have. The Gabriello and Hill article, Managing Performance, it poses some interesting questions that we want to think about, such as, is the person's performance the issue, or do I, as their manager, just not like the way that he or she is going about achieving the outcomes? And what extent do you, as the manager or supervisor, what extent do your actions contribute to the performance of the person? Have you intervened in the performance of the individual sometime during the past year when you could have made a difference in that person's performance, or did you wait? This article is also helpful as you plan to meet with Darcy. The other Capelli article, Capelli and Tabas, The Future Performance Reviews, this one you are familiar with because we assigned it in week 1. If you reviewed the entire article, then you do not need to do it again, but it's a good reminder if you did not read the entire thing. So let's take a look back at it. The last two articles, the Ewenstein and the Mintz articles, provide us with some current trends that I talked about a little in one of the slides. Some current trends in performance management. And since we now have a good foundation of the different types and methods of appraisals, we can look ahead to some of the newer trends. So I hope you'll find those helpful, and I hope you find that all of the articles are helpful, as I know that you're also conducting your research this week about how information technology is changing the performance management systems of our organizations and how we not only collect the data but also deliver it to employees. Looking forward to Module 5, our next module, then we'll actually get into delivering the feedback, coaching employees, and helping employees to deliver goals. We'll look at also specific situations such as an angry employee that you need to have a counseling session with or a feedback session. Unresponsive, these are of a particular interesting situation where the employees are unresponsive and we need to get their attention, or possibly defensive, and how we need to prepare for all of these situations, and how we can be mindful of how our behavior is going to affect the employee in that session. We also introduce SMART goals. Some of you know that we can also make SMART goals smarter, but I'll leave that for next week. So I hope that you enjoy first this week when we will focus on rater errors and how to avoid them, and the very important use of information technology for making performance appraisals and the entire performance management system more frequent, more agile, and many times not only more frequent but on demand by the employee or a team. All of the things that we have been speaking, we can also apply to teams. I look forward to reading your reports this week about the trends that you're finding in information technology, and how you have found one organization uses that technology to benefit their performance management system. So I hope you have a terrific week. As usual, I will be online with you, so I look forward to engaging with you in the discussions. So take care.